I, 32F, have been married to Adrian, 34M, for 6 years now. We met in college when I was a junior and he was a senior. At first, I thought he was just another frat boy, but as we got to know each other, I realized he was different, kind, ambitious, and family-oriented. We started dating after a few months of friendship, and things moved quickly from there. Adrian comes from a close-knit family, or so I thought at first. He's the oldest of 2 children. His younger sister, Carrie, 30F, has always been a bit of a wild child. When I first met her, she was in her 2nd year of college, constantly changing majors and partying more than studying. Adrian always spoke about her with a mix of exasperation and protectiveness. Their parents, Barbara, 58F, and Robert, 60M, seemed nice enough at first. Barbara was a stay-at-home mom who devoted her life to her children, while Robert worked long hours as an accountant. I remember thinking how lucky Adrian was to have such a devoted mother. However, as I spent more time with Adrian's family, I started noticing some strange dynamics. Barbara was overly attached to Adrian, calling him multiple times a day and expecting him to drop everything for her. She would often guilt-trip him if he didn't answer her calls immediately. Meanwhile, Carrie seemed to resent Adrian for being the golden child and would often try to sabotage our relationship. Early on, there were several incidents that should have been red flags. About 6 months into our relationship, Adrian invited me to stay over at his parents' house for a weekend. One morning, Carrie barged into Adrian's room while we were sleeping. We were both naked, and I was mortified. Carrie acted like it was no big deal and started chatting with Adrian about some trivial matter. When I complained to Adrian later, he brushed it off, saying that's just how Carrie is. Another time, during a family dinner to celebrate Adrian's graduation, Barbara kept making snide comments about my appearance and background. She even had the audacity to suggest that Adrian could do better right in front of me. I come from a working-class family, and Barbara seemed to think this made me unsuitable for her precious son. Adrian didn't stand up for me, which led to our first big fight. Despite these issues, Adrian and I got engaged after 2 years of dating. I had hoped that things would improve once we were married, but they only got worse. Barbara would constantly call Adrian to complain about Carrie's latest crisis, expecting him to fix everything. Carrie, meanwhile, had dropped out of college and gotten involved with a guy named Elijah, 32M, who was basically a leech. He didn't work, spent all day playing video games, and mooched off Carrie and Barbara. Our wedding day was a nightmare. Barbara cried through the entire ceremony, not tears of joy, but dramatic sobs about losing her baby boy. Carrie, who was a bridesmaid, showed up hungover and spent most of the reception complaining about her dress. Elijah got drunk and tried to start a fight with one of Adrian's groomsmen. After we got married, Adrian and I moved to a small apartment across town. We both had entry-level jobs and were saving up to buy a house. Barbara would often drop by unannounced, criticizing our tiny apartment and hinting that we should move closer to them. Carrie would call Adrian at all hours, usually needing money or a ride because Elijah had taken their car. Fast forward a few years. Adrian and I had both advanced in our careers. We worked hard, lived frugally, and finally saved up enough for a down payment on a house. We found our dream home, a spacious 4-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood. It was a bit of a fixer-upper, but we were excited about the project. The day we closed on the house, Barbara called Adrian in tears. Carrie was pregnant with her 2nd child, the first had been born 2 years earlier, and Elijah had lost their apartment because he hadn't paid rent in months. Barbara wanted us to let them move in with us just until they get back on their feet. Adrian and I had a huge fight about this. He felt guilty and wanted to help, but I put my foot down. We had worked too hard for this house to immediately turn it over to his irresponsible sister. Eventually, Adrian agreed, and we told Barbara no. She didn't speak to us for weeks after that. Over the next year, we poured our hearts into renovating our new home. We painted every room, replaced the old carpet with hardwood floors, and even put in a small vegetable garden in the backyard. It truly became our sanctuary. Then, last week, I got a call from Barbara out of the blue. She started off with small talk, asking how we were doing in the new house. Then, she dropped a bombshell. Carrie was pregnant again, with her 3rd child, and Barbara thought it would be a great idea for us to let Carrie, Elijah, and their kids move into our house. I was stunned. Barbara went on to explain that Carrie couldn't work during her pregnancy, and Elijah still hadn't found a job. Surprise, surprise. She said our house was too big for just the 2 of us, and we should be helping family. She even had the audacity to bring up the fact that Adrian and I don't have children yet, implying that we didn't need the space as much as Carrie did. What Barbara didn't know, because we hadn't told anyone yet, was that Adrian and I had been trying to have a baby for the past year. We'd recently found out that we might have fertility issues and were in the process of seeing specialists. The comment about us not having kids stung more than she could have known. I told Barbara that was absolutely not happening. Our house, our rules. She got angry and started guilt-tripping me, saying I was being selfish and that family should come first. She brought up how she had welcomed me into the family, a blatant lie given how she had treated me from the beginning, and that this was how I repaid her kindness. I stood my ground and told her that if she was so concerned, she should let them move in with her. Barbara then claimed that Adrian had already agreed to this arrangement. This set off alarm bells in my head because Adrian and I always discuss major decisions together. I told Barbara I'd talked to Adrian and ended the call. When Adrian got home, I confronted him about what Barbara had said. He was genuinely confused and assured me he had no idea what I was talking about. We called Barbara together, and she backpedaled, saying she had assumed Adrian would be okay with it because he's always been such a loving brother. Adrian finally stood up to his mother, telling her that we would not be housing Carrie and her family under any circumstances. He reminded her of all the times we'd helped Carrie in the past, co-signing for a car loan, babysitting her kids for free, even paying for a rehab stint for Elijah, and how she had never shown any appreciation or made any effort to improve her situation. Barbara started crying, saying we were abandoning family in their time of need. She brought up Adrian's childhood, how she had sacrificed everything for him, and how could he be so cruel now. Adrian held firm, and we ended the call. Now, Barbara and Carrie are blowing up our phones, calling us selfish and heartless. Carrie left a voicemail saying that if anything happened to her babies, it would be our fault. Elijah even showed up at Adrian's workplace, causing a scene and almost getting Adrian in trouble with his boss. Adrian's father, Robert, has stayed out of it for the most part, but he did call Adrian to ask if we could reconsider. When Adrian explained our side, Robert just sighed and said he'd try to talk to Barbara. I'm at my wit's end. I feel like I'm the bad guy for not wanting to give up my home to my irresponsible sister-in-law and her deadbeat husband. Adrian is stressed and torn between his loyalty to me and the guilt his mother is laying on him. We've worked so hard for our home and our life together. We're already dealing with the stress of potential fertility issues, and now this family drama is threatening to overwhelm us. I love Adrian, but I'm starting to resent his family and the constant drama they bring into our lives. Am I being unreasonable? How do we handle this situation without completely destroying family relationships? And how do I support Adrian through this while also protecting our home and our marriage? Update 1: It's been a week since my last post, and things have only gotten more complicated. First, I want to thank everyone for their support and advice. It really helped me feel less crazy about the whole situation. After our confrontation with Barbara, Adrian and I decided to take a step back and evaluate our relationships with his family. We agreed that we needed to set some firm boundaries, especially with Barbara and Carrie. We spent a whole weekend discussing our options and came up with a plan to limit contact and not give in to any more unreasonable demands. However, before we could implement any changes, Carrie showed up at our doorstep unannounced. It was a Wednesday evening, and Adrian and I had just finished dinner. We were relaxing on the couch when the doorbell rang. Adrian answered it, and I heard Carrie's voice, sounding distressed. She was crying and claimed that Barbara had kicked her out because we refused to take her in. I was immediately skeptical. Barbara had always favored Carrie, and it seemed unlikely that she would kick out her pregnant daughter. But Carrie can be quite the actress when she wants to be, and Adrian felt guilty seeing her upset. Against my better judgment, I agreed to let her come inside. As soon as she entered, the smell of cigarette smoke wafted in with her. I bit my tongue, remembering how she had promised to quit smoking when she found out she was pregnant with her first child. Carrie spun a sob story about how Elijah had left her, for the third time, how she was struggling with the pregnancy, and how she had nowhere else to go. She said Barbara had gotten fed up with her and Elijah's constant fighting and had told them to figure things out on their own. She begged us to let her stay just for a few days until she could figure things out. I could see Adrian wavering. Despite everything, he still had a soft spot for his little sister. He looked at me pleadingly, and I found myself agreeing to let her stay in our guest room for a week. I thought maybe this would be a chance for Carrie to get her act together, and for us to help her in a controlled way. Big mistake. Within 2 days, Carrie had completely taken over our house. She left messes everywhere, ate all our food without replacing it, and invited her friends over without asking. Our guest room, which we had just finished painting in preparation for potentially fostering in the future, was now strewn with her clothes and smelled of stale smoke. She also started hinting that she might need to stay longer than a week. She'd make comments about how peaceful our house was compared to Barbara's, and how good it was for the baby to be in a calm environment. Each time, I'd remind her that this was a temporary arrangement, but she'd just smile and change the subject. The situation was putting a strain on my relationship with Adrian. He was constantly torn between wanting to help his sister and respecting our agreement. We'd have whispered arguments in our bedroom at night, trying not to let Carrie overhear. The final straw came when I came home early from work one day. I had a migraine and decided to leave the office early to lie down. As I pulled into our driveway, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked in front of our house. My heart sank as I recognized it as Elijah's beat-up old Chevy. I walked into my house to find Carrie and Elijah lounging on our couch, drinking beer and watching TV. Elijah's feet were up on our coffee table, leaving muddy marks on the surface. They both looked up at me in surprise, clearly not expecting me home so early. I lost it. The stress of the past few days, coupled with my pounding headache, made me see red. I told them both to get out immediately. Carrie started crying again, saying I was being cruel to a pregnant woman. I didn't care. I told her she had betrayed our trust by bringing Elijah into our home without permission, and that she had an hour to pack her things and leave, or I'd call the police. Elijah tried to act tough, saying we couldn't kick out a pregnant woman. I reminded him that it was our house and we absolutely could. I also mentioned that I'd be happy to call his parole officer. I knew from Adrian that he was on parole for a DUI, and let them know he was drinking. Adrian came home in the middle of this confrontation and was shocked to find Elijah there. For once, he backed me up completely. He told Carrie that she had betrayed our trust and that she needed to leave. Carrie left, but not before screaming at us that we were horrible people and that she hoped we'd never have children of our own. That comment hit hard, given our struggles with fertility. Adrian looked like he'd been slapped. After Carrie and Elijah left, Adrian and I had a long, emotional talk. We both felt guilty and conflicted, but we also knew we had made the right decision. We agreed that we needed to take more drastic measures to protect ourselves and our home. The next day, we changed all our locks and installed a security system. We also decided to go low contact with Barbara and Carrie for the foreseeable future. Adrian was hesitant at first, but after I reminded him of all the stress and drama they had brought into our lives, he agreed it was necessary. The next day, Barbara called Adrian, furious about how we had thrown Carrie out on the street. Adrian tried to explain what had happened, but Barbara wouldn't listen. She accused me of turning Adrian against his family and said some truly hurtful things. She even brought up our fertility issues, which we had confided in her about, saying maybe it was for the best that we couldn't have children if this was how we treated family. Adrian finally snapped. He told Barbara that if she couldn't respect our decisions in our home, then maybe we needed to take a break from her too. He hung up on her mid-rant, something I had never seen him do before. Now, we're dealing with angry messages and social media posts from various family members, accusing us of abandoning Carrie in her time of need. Barbara has apparently been spreading her version of events to anyone who will listen. Only Adrian's father, Robert, has reached out to hear our side of the story. We're standing firm in our decision, but it's hard. Adrian is struggling with guilt, and I'm worried about the long-term impact on our relationship with his family. But at the same time, I feel like we're finally standing up for ourselves and our home. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I know we can't go back to how things were before. Adrian and I are united in this, but it's taking a toll on both of us. We're considering seeking couples therapy to help us navigate this difficult time. Has anyone else dealt with such a toxic family situation? How did you handle it? And how do you move forward when family members refuse to respect your boundaries? Update 2. It's been about a month since my last update, and things have taken an unexpected turn. I want to thank everyone again for their support and advice. It's been incredibly helpful during this difficult time. After we cut contact with Barbara and Carrie, we enjoyed a few weeks of peace. Adrian and I focused on each other and our home, trying to move past the drama. We even started talking about adoption or fostering as options for starting our family. We attended a few informational sessions and began the process of getting certified as foster parents. However, our calm was shattered when we received a call from Robert, Adrian's father. He informed us that Carrie had been hospitalized due to pregnancy complications. Apparently, the stress of her situation had caused some issues, and she was at risk of losing the baby. This news hit Adrian hard. Despite everything that had happened, Carrie was still his little sister, and the thought of her going through this alone was difficult for him. I could see him struggling with his emotions, torn between his anger at her recent behavior and his concern for her well-being. We had a long discussion about how to handle this situation. On one hand, we were worried about Carrie and the baby. On the other, we were wary of getting pulled back into the family drama. After hours of talking it through, we decided to visit Carrie in the hospital, but only if Barbara wasn't there. Robert agreed to coordinate with us to ensure Barbara wouldn't be there during our visit. When we arrived at the hospital, we found Carrie alone in her room. She looked terrible, pale, tired, and scared. For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. But then I reminded myself of all the chaos she had caused. To our surprise, Carrie actually apologized. She admitted that she had taken advantage of our kindness and that her behavior had been unacceptable. She explained that Elijah had left her for good this time, and she was truly on her own. She broke down crying, saying she was scared about the future and didn't know how she was going to manage 3 kids on her own. Adrian and I listened but remained cautious. We've been fooled by Carrie's apparent changes of heart before. Once, a few years ago, she had sworn she was turning her life around, only to relapse into drug use a month later. We told her that while we were glad she was okay, our boundaries remained firm. We wouldn't be housing her or supporting her financially. Carrie seemed to accept this, though she was clearly disappointed. She asked if we could at least stay in touch and maybe help her find resources for single mothers. We agreed to this limited involvement, feeling it was a reasonable compromise. As we were leaving, we ran into Barbara in the hallway. She started to lay into us about abandoning family, but Robert stepped in and shut her down. It was the first time I'd ever seen him stand up to her. He told her that now wasn't the time or place for this discussion, and that she needed to respect our decision to visit Carrie on our own terms. Robert pulled us aside and apologized for not intervening sooner. He admitted that he had enabled Barbara's behavior for years and that it had damaged the entire family. He shared that he had started attending therapy to work on setting his own boundaries with Barbara and Carrie. This was a surprise to us, as Robert had always been the quiet, go-along-to-get-along type. This conversation with Robert gave me hope that maybe, just maybe, things could improve. But I'm still wary. Years of drama and manipulation don't disappear overnight. After this hospital visit, Adrian and I had another long talk. We decided to maintain low contact with Carrie and Barbara for now. We'll check in occasionally about the pregnancy and offer emotional support, but we're not budging on our other boundaries. No more lending money, no more last-minute babysitting, and definitely no one moving into our house. As for our own family plans, we've continued the process of becoming foster parents. We've completed most of the required classes and home studies. It's a long road ahead, but we're excited about the possibility of providing a loving home to children in need. Adrian is still struggling with guilt sometimes, especially now with Carrie's pregnancy complications. But he's been going to individual therapy to work through his feelings, and I've seen a positive change in him. He's becoming more assertive and better at setting boundaries with his family. I'm cautiously optimistic about the future, but I know we need to remain vigilant. This situation has taught us the importance of presenting a united front and sticking to our decisions, no matter how much pressure we face from family. Has anyone else navigated a similar family situation? How did you balance compassion with self-protection? And for those who have fostered or adopted, how did you handle unsupportive family members? Update 3. It's been 3 months since my last update, and I wanted to share some final thoughts on this whole situation. First, the good news: Adrian and I have been approved as foster parents. We're currently waiting for our first placement, and we're both excited and nervous about this new chapter in our lives. We've set up 2 of our spare bedrooms as children's rooms, one for younger kids and one for teens. It feels good to be using our home to potentially help children in need, rather than enabling toxic family dynamics. As for the family situation, things have somewhat stabilized, but it's far from perfect. Carrie gave birth to a healthy baby boy last month. We visited her in the hospital and brought a small gift, but we kept our visit short and maintained our boundaries. Carrie seemed appreciative of our presence and didn't try to guilt us or ask for anything more. Barbara has been surprisingly well behaved lately. Robert's newfound backbone seems to have had an impact on her. She's been less intrusive and hasn't made any more outrageous demands. However, I'm still wary in keeping her at arm's length. Old habits die hard, and I'm not convinced this change will last. Carrie has been struggling as a single mother of 3, but she's making efforts to get her life together. She's enrolled in a job training program and is looking for affordable childcare. We've helped by providing information about local resources, but we've stayed firm on not offering financial support or housing. It's been hard to watch her struggle, but we know that continuing to enable her wouldn't be helpful in the long run. Elijah briefly reappeared, claiming he wanted to be part of the baby's life. Carrie, to her credit, told him to prove himself by getting a job and paying child support before she'd even consider letting him be involved. Last we heard, he hadn't followed through. Part of me hopes he stays away for good, but another part knows the kids might be better off with a reformed father in their lives. It's a complicated situation. Adrian and I have been attending couples counseling to work through some of the lingering issues from this whole ordeal. It's been helpful in strengthening our communication and setting mutual goals for our relationship and future family. We've also been working on strategies to handle potential conflicts with his family once we have foster children in our home. We've maintained our low-contact approach with Barbara and Carrie, which has done wonders for our stress levels. We check in occasionally and attend major family events, but we no longer feel obligated to be at their beck and call. It's been liberating to have this distance. Robert has become an unexpected ally in all of this. He's been going to therapy regularly and has made real efforts to repair his relationships with both Adrian and Carrie. He's also been a buffer between us and Barbara, which we greatly appreciate. Last week, he came over to help us childproof the house in preparation for fostering. It was nice to have his support and to see him taking an interest in our lives. Looking back, I realize how close we came to letting toxic family dynamics destroy our marriage and our dreams. While it was painful to go through, I'm glad we stood our ground and protected our home and our relationship. It hasn't been easy, and there are still moments of doubt and guilt, but overall, we feel stronger as a couple. As we prepare to welcome foster children into our lives, I feel more confident than ever in our ability to create a loving, stable home. We've learned valuable lessons about setting boundaries, communicating clearly, and prioritizing our own family unit. To anyone dealing with similar family issues, my advice would be to stay strong, set clear boundaries, and don't be afraid to distance yourself from toxic behaviors. It's not easy, but it's worth it for your peace of mind and the health of your own family.